OMG, you guys. We have to talk about Kyle Richards because she just blew the entire lid off her marriage, and the Beverly Hills elite are absolutely shaking right now. After months of throwing subtle shade, posting cryptic Instagram stories, and leaving us all to guess what really went down behind the closed doors of their multi-million-dollar mansion, the Queen of Beverly Hills has finally broken her silence. And let me tell you, it is far more calculated, savage, and financially devastating than anyone could have ever predicted. Are we actually looking at the complete demolition of Bravo's ultimate golden couple? Or is this the most brilliant, high-stakes PR stunt in reality television history? For 27 years, Kyle and Mauricio Umansky sold us the ultimate suburban fairy tale, complete with a thriving real estate empire, beautiful daughters, and a seemingly unbreakable bond. But the illusion has officially shattered, and Kyle is done pretending. Grab your ice match on, sit tight, because Kyle just walked right into the lion's den and exposed Mauricio in a way that changes everything. We are talking about alleged secret financial accounts, disputed asset valuations, and a potentially savage legal strategy that could divide a massive fortune down to the very last cent. If you thought the on-screen tension was bad during the reunions, you are not ready for the bombshell claims circulating around the LA County Court records. Kyle is no longer staying silent. The gloves are officially off, and Mauricio's empire is hanging by a very thin, very expensive thread. The glamorous facade of Beverly Hills has officially cracked, and what lies underneath is a toxic mix of corporate tension, strategic betrayal, and a high-stakes financial battle that makes standard reality television drama look like a playground dispute. For years, the world watched Kyle Richards and Mauricio Umansky build an empire based on the perfect projection of a modern, wealthy, and seemingly unbreakable family unit. They were the benchmark for success on Bravo, a rare anomaly in a franchise famous for destroying marriages within a single season. But behind the synchronized red carpet appearances and curated social media posts, a much darker and more calculated game of financial chess was allegedly being played. The public started noticing the cracks in mid-2023 when Kyle suddenly stopped posting her usual adoring tributes to Mauricio. But the internet was completely distracted by the sudden and bizarre entrance of country singer Morgan Wade, while the entire world was obsessing over matching tattoos, cryptic lyrics, and paparazzi shots of Kyle walking through airports with the musician. The real battle was allegedly happening in the corporate boardrooms of luxury real estate. Mauricio Umansky had spent the last decade positioning himself as the ultimate real estate mogul, the king of high-end listings, and the face of a global brokerage known as the Agency. But what he seemingly forgot, according to the narrative surrounding their split, is that the financial interests built during a 27-year marriage can become a major point of contention when a couple separates. To understand the sheer scale of the alleged betrayal, we have to look back at who Mauricio Umansky was before the cameras started rolling in Beverly Hills. When Kyle married Mauricio in 1996, he was not the ultra-wealthy, smooth-talking CEO of a major real estate firm. He was a struggling salesman who had just been fired from a clothing company, living in a cramped two-bedroom apartment with a young wife and a baby on the way. Kyle's family, particularly her sister Kathy Hilton and her brother-in-law Rick Hilton, helped Mauricio get an opportunity at Hilton and Highland, the premier luxury real estate brokerage in Los Angeles. It was under the Hilton umbrella that Mauricio learned the business, gained access to wealthy clients, and built relationships that would later become important to his career. But loyalty in Beverly Hills is a very cheap commodity, and once Mauricio tasted a fraction of that elite success, he made a major move. He broke away from Hilton and Highland to launch his own competing firm, the Agency, a decision that contributed to a major family rift between Kyle and her sister Kathy. Kyle chose her husband over her own blood, enduring years of family tension, public scrutiny, and difficult holidays while supporting Mauricio's professional ambitions. She also used her massive platform on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills to help make the agency a recognizable name, transforming her husband's profile from luxury real estate executive into an international celebrity CEO with his own Netflix reality series. Now, fast forward to the current fallout. Claims circulating online have suggested that internal financial documents may reveal a deeper level of financial tension within the Richards-Umansky marriage. However, those claims should be treated as allegations unless the underlying documents are independently verified and made part of the public record. And that is where this story gets even more complicated. Mauricio has spent the last 18 months allegedly attempting to legally isolate the agency's international assets from the marital estate. The report suggests that Mauricio quietly established offshore holding companies and restructured the ownership percentages of several European and Caribbean franchises of the agency. According to these allegations, this was not a sudden decision made in the heat of a marital fight. It was allegedly a cold, calculated, premeditated attempt to reduce the reported value of the marital property before a formal divorce could ever be filed in court. When Kyle allegedly discovered these corporate maneuvers through a private forensic accounting firm she reportedly hired late last year, the dynamic of their separation changed instantly from a mutual, amicable space into an absolute bloodbath. Friends close to the actress reportedly stated that Kyle felt a level of betrayal that surpassed any rumors of infidelity or emotional distance. She had sacrificed her relationship with her own family to support the success of his business, only to allegedly discover that he was working behind her back to protect his financial interests if they ever legally parted ways. The shockwave of this alleged discovery is what reportedly prompted Kyle to finally walk onto Andy Cohen's set and deliver the chilling ultimatum that sent shockwaves through the real estate industry, declaring that half of the agency belongs to her and that she has no intention of walking away empty-handed. The public reaction to these alleged financial documents and Kyle's sudden aggressive stance has completely divided the fan base and the elite circles of Los Angeles. For months, Mauricio managed to maintain the public image of a heartbroken, hard-working husband who was simply trying to save his marriage while juggling a massive global business. He would drop affectionate comments on Kyle's Instagram, call her his love in front of the paparazzi, and act like a man who was waiting for his wife to come back to her senses. But the alleged revelation of secret asset restructuring has completely challenged that persona, with critics portraying it as a brilliant piece of public relations theater designed to keep Kyle complacent while his legal team allegedly laid the groundwork for a financial battle. Insiders within Beverly Hills high society are reportedly disgusted by the alleged level of deception, with claims that several high-profile clients have quietly pulled their luxury listings from the agency because they fear being dragged into a messy and public corporate asset dispute. The tension has also allegedly spilled heavily into the lives of their 4 daughters, who have spent their entire lives watching their parents present a united front to the world. Sources allege that the daughters are furious with their father after learning about the alleged financial maneuvers, feeling that his actions were not just an attack on their mother, but an attempt to destabilize the legacy that was meant for the entire family. One of their older daughters reportedly confronted Mauricio at his office, accusing him of using the family's reality TV fame to build an empire, only to allegedly try to lock them out of the room once he reached the top. Meanwhile, the psychological tension between the two has reportedly escalated to an all-time high within the walls of their shared Encino mansion. Despite being separated for an extended period, both Kyle and Mauricio have reportedly refused to move out of the property, creating a living situation that sources have described as a high-security prison camp. Both parties have reportedly instructed their personal staff, assistants, and housekeepers to maintain strict confidentiality, creating an environment where information has become the most valuable currency. Kyle has reportedly changed the access codes to her private wing of the house, and installed independent security measures to protect her personal documents, diaries, and digital devices from any unauthorized entry. This brings us to the infamous Aspen trip during the recent holidays, an event that was supposed to be neutral ground for the family to celebrate together for the sake of the children. Instead, it allegedly became the final catalyst for Kyle's public explosion. For days, the internet speculated that a reconciliation was on the horizon, as photos surfaced of the family walking through the snow and dining at elite mountain restaurants. But what the cameras didn't show was the alleged explosive confrontation that occurred behind closed doors at their mountain estate. Kyle reportedly confronted Mauricio with the exact details of the offshore holding companies her forensic accountants had allegedly uncovered, demanding a transparent explanation for the sudden shifts in corporate ownership. Instead of offering a logical business justification, Mauricio reportedly became defensive, dismissing her concerns as paranoia and accusing her of allowing her reality TV mind to invent conspiracies. It was during this exact trip that Kyle allegedly witnessed Mauricio openly disrespecting their history, engaging in what was described as blatantly inappropriate behavior with younger women in the elite lounges of Aspen, completely unbothered by the fact that his wife and daughters were in the exact same town. This alleged public display of a wandering eye, combined with the reported corporate tension, was the moment Kyle allegedly realized that the man she had loved and protected for nearly 3 decades was completely gone, replaced by what she viewed as a ruthless corporate entity that saw her not as a partner, but as a legal liability that needed to be managed and minimized. As soon as the private jet touched down back in Los Angeles, Kyle reportedly initiated a total shift in her strategy, completely abandoning the soft, vague PR statements about having a rough year and loving each other regardless of the outcome. She allegedly greenlit a full-scale legal assault, authorizing her attorneys to prepare a comprehensive demand for a complete, unredacted audit of every financial transaction made by the agency and its subsidiaries over the past 5 years. This alleged legal demand is what reportedly sent Mauricio's corporate infrastructure into a panic, because luxury real estate brokerages rely heavily on reputation, discretion, and investor confidence. A public, court-ordered forensic audit could mean that financial transactions, investor arrangements, and corporate agreements become subject to intense legal scrutiny. The implications of such an audit would stretch far beyond a standard divorce settlement, potentially exposing the inner workings of an industry that thrives on privacy and confidential agreements. Mauricio's legal team is reportedly scrambling to file protective orders to prevent sensitive financial documents from becoming part of the public record, arguing that public disclosure could cause serious harm to the business and its shareholders. But Kyle's legal team is allegedly using the threat of greater transparency as leverage to force Mauricio into a corner where he would have to either address her demands or face additional judicial scrutiny. This brings us to the absolute core of the crisis, the legal definition of the separation itself, which has become one of the most important battlegrounds of the entire dispute. In California, the date of separation can have major consequences for how marital property and future earnings are evaluated. According to the claims in this narrative, Mauricio's team is attempting to establish that the separation occurred much earlier, potentially affecting how certain profits and business expansion deals are treated in a divorce proceeding. Kyle, conversely, is allegedly prepared to argue that they continued presenting themselves as a functional, emotionally connected couple well into recent months. To support that position, the narrative claims that Kyle could potentially rely on evidence from their reality television appearances, personal communications, and family travel records. She could argue that while Mauricio was expanding his business globally, he was still benefiting from her celebrity status, social media influence, and personal support. The sheer volume of evidence she is allegedly prepared to present has made it clear to Mauricio's camp, according to these claims, that this is no longer simply a domestic dispute about hurt feelings. It has become a potentially serious legal and financial battle surrounding a public business empire. The strategy has now reportedly shifted from private negotiations to an all-out media war, with both sides allegedly using their respective public relations teams to push competing narratives. Mauricio's camp has reportedly been whispering to entertainment blogs that Kyle has become emotionally unstable and heavily influenced by an outside circle of friends who do not have her best interests at heart. The alleged strategy is to portray her as a vindictive spouse who is willing to damage a successful business because of anger surrounding the natural end of a long relationship. That narrative would potentially distance Kyle from the business community while positioning Mauricio as the rational, protective patriarch, simply trying to defend the company that supports their children's lifestyles. But Kyle Richards is not a novice when it comes to media manipulation. She has spent her entire life in the Hollywood spotlight and survived more than a decade in one of the most intense reality television environments in the world. She has reportedly countered this narrative by opening up about the emotional difficulties she has experienced, shifting the public perception from a bitter ex-wife to an empowered woman reclaiming her independence. She has also cleverly connected her personal healing journey with her professional ambitions, ensuring that whenever she discusses the pain of her marriage, she also highlights her new solo professional ventures. This media savvy has reportedly neutralized Mauricio's attempts to discredit her, leaving him facing the harsh reality that his corporate survival could be affected by the legal battle surrounding his marriage. The chessboard is fully set, and Kyle's media strategy has allegedly backed Mauricio into a financial corner that he may not have anticipated. With the possibility of a full-scale forensic audit hanging over the dispute, the king of luxury real estate is suddenly facing questions about how his business interests could be affected by a contentious Los Angeles divorce proceeding. Behind the closed doors of his Beverly Hills office, the mood is described by alleged insiders as extremely tense, as executives at the agency reportedly worry that sensitive financial records, corporate structures, and investor information could face additional scrutiny. According to rumors circulating within the California real estate community, the alleged audit documents are only the beginning of a much larger financial dispute. Anonymous sources claim that Kyle's legal team has uncovered a series of questionable asset transfers that allegedly occurred around the time the couple publicly announced their separation. These records allegedly show that Mauricio began transferring large sums of capital from joint accounts into private corporate entities based overseas. However, these claims have not been independently verified, and the existence or purpose of any such transactions would need to be established through authenticated financial records or court filings. According to the narrative, the transfers were allegedly structured as legitimate business investments, potentially making them more difficult to classify during a divorce proceeding. When Kyle was reportedly alerted to these transactions by her financial investigators, she allegedly did not simply become angry. She became strategic. She reportedly realized that Mauricio may have been planning his financial position months in advance, potentially using their public statements of mutual respect to buy time while reorganizing his business interests. If proven, such allegations could dramatically change the legal stakes of the separation. The discovery allegedly shattered whatever remaining affection or guilt Kyle had about ending the marriage, transforming her approach from a painful family breakdown into what sources describe as a focused asset recovery strategy. The immediate fallout from these alleged discoveries has reportedly triggered concerns among investors connected to Mauricio's luxury real estate business. In the world of luxury real estate, perception can be extremely important, and investors may be reluctant to have private capital associated with a company caught in the middle of a highly publicized celebrity divorce. Several investment groups from the Middle East and New York have reportedly paused funding for upcoming luxury residential projects, allegedly demanding assurances that their capital would not be affected by the ongoing legal dispute. These claims remain unverified, however, And there is no confirmed evidence presented here that major investors have actually withdrawn or frozen funding. To make matters worse for the real estate mogul, rumors suggest that his internal corporate structure is beginning to feel pressure from the controversy. Top producing agents at the agency, who generate significant commissions every year, are reportedly exploring opportunities with rival luxury brokerages such as Hilton and Highland and Compass. The alleged concern is that prolonged litigation could create uncertainty around business operations and commission payments. If Mauricio is forced to fight a major divorce battle while simultaneously defending his company's reputation, the pressure could become extremely difficult to manage. He would essentially be facing a dual challenge, defending his financial interests in court while maintaining confidence among employees, clients, and investors. While Mauricio battles to keep his corporate empire stable, the Beverly Hills social circle has allegedly descended into a state of open tension as people find themselves choosing sides. For decades, Kyle and Mauricio were major social anchors of the community, hosting charity events, private gatherings, and holiday celebrations. Now, according to these reports, wealthy socialites are increasingly uncomfortable putting both of them in the same room. That has reportedly created a highly calculated system of social distancing where mutual friends feel pressured to decide whether they are closer to Team Kyle or Team Mauricio. The tension has allegedly reached such a point that several prominent members of the Beverly Hills elite have distanced themselves from Mauricio, refusing to return calls or engage with his business publicly. The reported consensus among some members of the social circle is that Mauricio crossed a major line if the allegations about financial restructuring are eventually proven. Kyle, meanwhile, is allegedly receiving messages of support from influential women who view her as a symbol of financial independence and personal survival. That social pressure has reportedly pushed Mauricio toward an even more aggressive public relations strategy, with appearances designed to project the image that he remains completely unbothered by the unfolding crisis. He has reportedly been spotted dining at high-profile restaurants in West Hollywood surrounded by a rotating cast of younger models, influencers, and reality TV hopefuls. Sources close to the situation claim that this is a deliberate move, orchestrated by his new PR advisors, to project an image of absolute confidence, attempting to signal to the business world that his personal life is completely fine. However, according to the narrative, this strategy has allegedly backfired within his own household, creating even more tension between Mauricio and his daughters. Farah, Alexia, Sophia, and Portia have spent their entire lives under the intense spotlight of reality television, but they have also maintained a strong sense of family loyalty. Watching their parents navigate a bitter separation while their father is repeatedly photographed with younger women has reportedly created emotional tension within the family. Sources close to the family allege that the three oldest daughters, who have professional connections to the agency, confronted Mauricio about the situation. According to these claims, they told him that his public behavior was damaging the family's remaining dignity and potentially affecting the reputation of a business they had all helped promote. The alleged confrontation was described as extremely emotional, with the daughters reportedly accusing their father of prioritizing his public image over the family's feelings. Mauricio's response, according to these unnamed sources, was that his public appearances were necessary to demonstrate to investors and clients that he was not overwhelmed by the negative publicity. If that account is accurate, the explanation may have only increased the distance between Mauricio and his children. Meanwhile, Kyle has reportedly become the emotional center of the family, creating a private space where her daughters can gather and support one another during the difficult period. The tension inside the home has allegedly reached a point where Kyle and Mauricio rarely interact directly. Some reports have even described the mansion as effectively divided into separate living areas, with each side maintaining its own routines and personal space. Communication between the two is reportedly limited, with sensitive conversations increasingly handled through written messages. If lawyers become involved in those communications, the stakes become even higher because every statement can potentially become part of a future legal dispute. As the domestic environment becomes increasingly uncomfortable, Kyle has reportedly shifted more of her energy toward establishing an independent financial future. Rather than relying on Mauricio's business empire, she has continued developing her own professional opportunities, including television, entertainment, branding, and other ventures connected to her public profile. The larger objective appears to be independence. Kyle has spent decades being publicly identified as Mauricio Umansky's wife. Now, she has an opportunity to establish herself as a businesswoman and entertainment personality whose success exists independently of her marriage. Her reported expansion into new production and media projects could become an important part of that transition. Rather than remaining defined by the collapse of her marriage, Kyle can potentially turn the next chapter of her career into a story about reinvention. That could also create an interesting contrast with Mauricio's own reality TV ambitions. Both individuals built enormous public profiles through their relationship, but they now appear to be moving toward increasingly independent identities. Meanwhile, the legal maneuvering surrounding their separation would become even more important if the financial allegations were ever substantiated. Reports have suggested that questions could arise regarding corporate ownership, business interests, investments, real estate, and other assets accumulated during the marriage. However, claims about specific subpoenas, depositions, offshore entities, or court orders should not be treated as established facts unless they are supported by authentic court records. That distinction matters because celebrity divorce stories can quickly transform rumors into supposed facts once the same claims are repeated across multiple entertainment platforms. If a formal deposition were actually scheduled, Mauricio could potentially face detailed questions concerning his business structure and financial interests. But a deposition would not automatically mean that he had done anything wrong. It would simply be part of the legal process through which both sides attempt to establish what assets exist and how they should be treated under applicable California law. Likewise, any allegation involving hidden assets or improper transfers would need to be proven through evidence rather than social media speculation. That is precisely why a forensic financial review can become so important in a high-value divorce. Accountants can trace transactions, examine corporate records, compare reported income with actual business activity, and identify transfers that may require additional explanation. For Kyle, such information could potentially determine the true financial picture of the marriage. For Mauricio, complete transparency could be equally important because it would allow him to challenge inaccurate allegations and establish the legitimate business reasons behind any corporate restructuring. As the pressure increases, rumors of a potential settlement are also likely to grow. A settlement could potentially allow both sides to avoid a lengthy public court battle, preserve privacy, and protect their children's interests. But whether Kyle would accept such an agreement would depend on the actual terms, the financial disclosures involved, and the legal advice she receives. The idea that she would simply accept a large payment in exchange for permanent silence remains speculation, unless an actual settlement agreement becomes public. What is clear is that Kyle has spent years building a life and identity beyond being Mauricio's wife. After nearly 3 decades of marriage, the prospect of starting over may be painful, but it also gives her an opportunity to redefine herself on her own terms. And that may be the most important part of this entire story. Because if this marriage ultimately ends, the biggest question may not be how much money either side receives. It may be who they become afterward. Mauricio has built a global real estate identity. Kyle has built a television legacy and a powerful personal brand. Now, both are being forced to determine what remains when the marriage that connected those two worlds is no longer the center of their lives. For the moment, the rumors continue, the speculation grows, and fans remain divided. But until actual court documents, financial records, or verified statements confirm the most explosive allegations, the public should separate what is documented from what is merely being claimed. Because in Beverly Hills, the most dramatic story is not always the most accurate one. And if Kyle and Mauricio's legal battle does eventually become public, the documents, not the rumors, will ultimately tell us just how much of this story was real. The rejected settlement would send a powerful message through the Los Angeles legal ecosystem that Kyle is no longer willing to follow the old rules of elite Hollywood divorces, where women are expected to quietly accept a massive payout in exchange for protecting an ex-husband's reputation. With the alleged settlement now off the table, attention would naturally turn toward the possibility of formal discovery and depositions. And if that process becomes public, the legal fallout could attract enormous attention throughout Beverly Hills. Some commentators have speculated that the case could raise interesting questions about how community property, business interests, and celebrity branding are evaluated in a California divorce. But there is an important distinction between an interesting legal argument and an established court precedent. One of the most intriguing issues would be whether Kyle's lawyers could demonstrate that her television fame and personal brand contributed materially to the growth of Mauricio's business. For years, the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills gave viewers access to Kyle and Mauricio's lifestyle, family, homes, friendships, and professional world. If lawyers attempted to establish a financial connection between that exposure and business growth, they could potentially examine television ratings, website traffic, marketing campaigns, client acquisition, social media engagement, and other measurable data. The argument would not necessarily be that Kyle personally created Mauricio's real estate business. Instead, it could focus on whether the visibility generated by their public relationship created measurable commercial value for the broader brand. That distinction could become extremely important. Mauricio's success in real estate obviously involved his own work, business decisions, professional relationships, and management skills. But Kyle's legal team could potentially argue that the public platform surrounding their marriage provided an additional form of exposure that helped strengthen the company's profile. Whether such an argument would succeed would depend entirely on the evidence and the applicable law. Meanwhile, rumors about Mauricio's corporate relationships have added another layer to the story. Some reports have speculated that lenders, investors, and business partners could become concerned about the consequences of a prolonged celebrity divorce involving valuable business interests. However, there is currently a major difference between speculation about investors becoming nervous and verified evidence that major financial institutions have actually withdrawn support. In a company operating across multiple markets, reputation and stability can certainly matter. Luxury real estate depends heavily on relationships, discretion, confidence, and the perception that a company can handle large transactions without disruption. That is why even an unproven controversy can create uncertainty. If Mauricio's personal legal dispute were to become deeply connected with the company's corporate structure, business partners could reasonably seek additional information before making major commitments. This is where the story becomes bigger than Kyle and Mauricio themselves. The question becomes whether a personal divorce can remain separate from a business empire when the two have been publicly connected for decades. Rumors have also suggested that internal disagreements could emerge within the agency itself. Some speculative reports have claimed that senior executives or regional partners could be discussing contingency plans in case the dispute begins affecting the company's reputation. But again, those reports should be treated carefully unless supported by verified corporate records or direct statements from the people involved. There is no reason to assume that a divorce automatically means a company's leadership structure is collapsing. Still, the possibility creates a fascinating question. What happens when a company built around a highly recognizable founder suddenly becomes surrounded by intense personal controversy? For Mauricio, Protecting the business could become just as important as protecting his personal reputation. And for Kyle, protecting her own financial future could become equally important. That may explain why the public narrative surrounding her has increasingly shifted from heartbreak to independence. Instead of being defined exclusively as Mauricio Umansky's wife, Kyle has spent years building a separate identity through television, fashion, entertainment, and other business ventures. That transition could become one of the most significant parts of her next chapter. If she successfully establishes herself independently, the end of her marriage would not necessarily represent the end of her professional story. It could become the beginning of an entirely different one. At home, however, the situation would remain much more complicated. Reports have described the former couple's shared residence as increasingly divided, with separate routines and increasingly limited communication. If true, that kind of arrangement can become emotionally exhausting, particularly when children and business interests are involved. Kyle and Mauricio's daughters have spent their entire lives watching their parents operate as a team. Even if they remain loyal to both parents, a prolonged conflict can put enormous emotional pressure on adult children. That is why maintaining boundaries between the personal dispute and the family relationship could become one of the most important challenges for everyone involved. The biggest question now is what happens if negotiations fail completely? Could the dispute eventually move into a more public phase? Would both sides be willing to expose sensitive financial information? Could they reach a private agreement before that happens? Those questions remain unanswered, and despite the dramatic claims circulating online, there is still no substitute for actual court filings, verified financial documents, and statements directly from the parties involved. If Mauricio were eventually required to give sworn testimony, the significance would not simply be the spectacle of seeing a famous reality TV personality under oath. The real importance would be the information revealed about the couple's financial structure, business interests, property ownership, and separation timeline. Likewise, Kyle could face equally serious scrutiny concerning her own finances, investments, and professional activities. A divorce involving substantial assets is rarely a one-sided investigation. Both parties have rights, responsibilities, and financial interests that must be examined. That is what makes the next stage potentially so important. The public may want a simple hero and villain story, but the legal system does not operate that way. It deals with documents, contracts, bank records, corporate structures, property titles, tax filings, and evidence. That means the most explosive claims circulating online could eventually prove irrelevant if they cannot be supported. At the same time, seemingly boring financial documents could reveal more than any dramatic television confrontation ever could. And that is why fans are watching so closely. For nearly 3 decades, Kyle Richards and Mauricio Umansky represented a particular version of Beverly Hills success. A beautiful family, a luxury lifestyle, a thriving business, and a marriage that appeared strong enough to survive the pressures of reality television. Now that image has changed. Whether the marriage ultimately ends privately or through a highly public legal battle, the next chapter could redefine how both of them are viewed. Kyle's biggest challenge will be proving that she can build a future that stands independently from Mauricio. Mauricio's challenge will be protecting both his personal reputation and the business empire he spent decades building. And somewhere between those two objectives lies the future of their family. The story is far from finished, but one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Whatever happens next will be determined less by Instagram posts and television drama, and more by what can actually be proven. Because when the cameras stop rolling and lawyers enter the room, the story changes completely. The next decision could ultimately come down to 2 very different options. Mauricio could fight aggressively, risking a much more public examination of his finances and business interests, or he could negotiate a settlement designed to protect the company and keep the most sensitive details out of the public spotlight. Reports claiming that his legal team is divided over the strategy remain unverified, but the basic dilemma is easy to understand. A prolonged legal battle can become incredibly expensive, emotionally exhausting, and damaging to both parties. A private settlement, meanwhile, can provide certainty and allow everyone involved to move forward without years of courtroom conflict. But pride can complicate everything. Mauricio has spent decades building a public identity around business success, confidence, and luxury real estate. The idea of appearing to lose control of an empire he helped build could be difficult for anyone in his position. Kyle, meanwhile, has spent years developing her own public identity and has demonstrated that she is capable of surviving enormous personal and professional pressure. That is why the next phase of this story could be less about television drama and more about negotiation. If both sides recognize how much damage a prolonged public battle could create, a compromise may ultimately make more sense than an all-out war. But if negotiations collapse, the financial questions could become much more important. What assets were accumulated during the marriage? Which businesses are considered separate property? Which interests were developed during the marriage? When did the couple's separation legally begin? And what evidence exists to support either side's position? Those are the questions that could ultimately determine the financial outcome. Not rumors, not anonymous social media posts, not dramatic headlines. Evidence. That distinction is especially important because many of the most sensational claims surrounding Kyle and Mauricio remain unverified. There is a huge difference between a leaked rumor claiming that offshore companies exist and an authenticated financial document proving ownership. There is also a major difference between speculation about a secret settlement and an actual settlement filed with a court. Until those documents become available, viewers should remain skeptical of anyone presenting every allegation as established fact. Still, the broader story remains fascinating because Kyle and Mauricio are not simply two celebrities ending a relationship. They are two people whose professional identities became deeply intertwined with their marriage. Their family appeared on television. Their businesses became part of their public story. Their homes became recognizable locations. Their arguments became entertainment. And their success became part of the mythology of Beverly Hills reality television. Now they have to separate those worlds. For Kyle, that could mean building a future where her name stands completely on its own. For Mauricio, it could mean proving that his business success can withstand the intense scrutiny surrounding his personal life. And for their daughters, it means watching their parents redefine a relationship that has shaped their entire lives. Whatever happens next, there may be no easy ending. A private agreement could protect everyone's privacy, but it would leave many questions unanswered. A public courtroom battle could provide more transparency, but it could also expose deeply personal financial and family information. And a prolonged dispute could damage both sides, even if one eventually wins more financially. That is why the smartest outcome may not necessarily be the most dramatic one. The most important thing is that whatever agreement or judgment eventually emerges should be based on verified financial information and applicable law, rather than the sensational narratives dominating social media. Because when millions of dollars and decades of family history are involved, reality television can only tell part of the story. The legal record tells another, and the two versions may look very different. So, as the Kyle Richards and Mauricio Umansky story continues to develop, the biggest question is not simply who wins. It is what each person wants their life to look like when the cameras finally stop following them. Will Kyle emerge from this chapter with a stronger, independent identity? Will Mauricio successfully protect the business he spent decades building? Will they find a way to protect their daughters from becoming permanent casualties of their dispute? Or will the separation become one of the most public celebrity financial battles Beverly Hills has seen in years? Only time will tell. And until verified documents reveal what is actually happening behind closed doors, every explosive claim should be treated as a claim, not a confirmed fact. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think Kyle and Mauricio should resolve their financial dispute privately, or should everything be examined publicly if major assets are genuinely in question? Do you think Kyle's television fame should have any role in determining the financial value created during their marriage? And most importantly, do you believe the two of them can eventually put their differences aside for the sake of their family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update. We'll continue following the verified developments, court filings, business news, and public statements surrounding Kyle Richards and Mauricio Umansky. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, and remember, in Beverly Hills, the biggest story isn't always the loudest one. I'll see you in the next video.